Hi everyone, this is a test recording for the presentation I'll be giving at FUSE U Connect 2023 in Birmingham, where I will share some lessons learned while submitting data packages to the FDA CBER division. The usual disclaimer. So as I said, I'd like to share some experience we had in submitting data packages to the FDA CBER in the past 5 years at CITEL, but at first I would like to make a quick recap on what are, as of today, the key requirements and therefore available FDA guidance when submitting data packages as a part of a request for market approval, and in particular to the CBER division. So the first two guidance, both binding, set out the requirements of electronic submission through the use of a set of standards. With the Study Data Technical Performance Guide, providing more detailed specification, recommendation, and general consideration on how to submit standardized data using the FDA-supported data standard. These set of standards accepted by the FDA are located in the so-called FDA Data Standard Catalog, where standard and version supported are tracked and regularly updated. Furthermore, to reintroduce its data standard regulation, the FDA has also established some formal rejection criteria that, although currently limited in scope, scrutinize the submitted data and, if failed, this might result in the rejection or hold of the data submission package. This means that the submitted data packages will not be evaluated or utilized by the reviewer until it meets the necessary criteria. When we say standard, this is not just CDISC. We also have standard for medical terminology by using established external dictionaries such as MEDRA when coding adverse events. But we also have to follow some specific rules when providing documents, for example, a clinical study report. And we have to follow some specific requirements for PDF document. And again, these requirements are documented in one specific FDA guidance, as well as some additional requirements that we have inherited from the electronic common technical document guidance, such as, for example, the way of naming files, for example, programs. But there are also additional requirements or guidance that you might be exposed to in specific instances. I'm here simply listing some of them, including some requirements when submitting supplemental material, data and models in supporting of, for example, pharmacometrics analysis, such as the analysis of POP-PK data. But there are also other guidance developed by individuals, either division or unit of FDA, that make some data submission a unique experience. And among these additional requirements and additional guidance, there is the vaccine guidance from the CBER division that I'm discussing more in detail in the paper that will be available on the FUSE website. This guidance has been also the object of several presentations by a number of companies in past events, and I'm providing again a reference at the end of my presentation and in the paper as well, including a recent one I did at one CDISC event, for which, if you like, I can provide a copy of slides and paper. By the way, you can also find the recording of that presentation on my YouTube channel. As of today, or at least to my knowledge, data submission using FDA adopted standard is mainly a requirement of the CDER and CBER FDA division. Although other divisions, such as the one in charge for the approval of medical devices, are also recommended those standards as well. These two divisions, so the CDER and the CBER division, for which sometimes people find difficult to understand the distinction, but we can say that in general, CDER is responsible to regulate drug approvals, while CBER focuses more on products that are not necessarily considered drug, such as vaccine, or more in general, derived biological product. You can get some example or recent approved drug and biological products from the Access Data FDA portal, where you can also have access to technical documents, minutes, etc., etc. You can find here the link. The two divisions maintain also a portal where you can query for statistics of number of approval requests, approvals that can be also filter through different filtering options. And as I anticipated, CBER has some specific requirements, in particular when submitting data packages to the Office of Vaccine Research and Review. And their additional technical specification, where this particular office provides very detailed specification for some SDTM topics, following also some recommendation from the CDER vaccine therapeutic area user guidance. Overall, all the specifications are aligned with the SDTM implementation guidance, with the agency also making clear, for example, that things like clarification on where, for example, immunogenicity data should be mapped. So this data should be mapped to the immunogenicity specimen domain, so the IS domain, and not to the LB, the generic laboratory domain. And this is also was the object of a recent CDER webinar. These requirements, when they were first introduced in 2018, obviously pose some additional challenges when introduced in organizations with well-established data governance, as discussed in some of the presentation I previously mentioned, that I'm also referencing in my paper. In particular, the way the reactogenicity data are mapped into SDTM. These are one of the main study objectives in vaccine studies, and they refer to a set of expected adverse reactions associated with the vaccine administration. These reactions are typically solicited for a defined period after vaccination and can include symptoms like fever. So when I say solicited, means that a set of adverse events are also pre-printed in the ECRF, in data collection form. Typically, you have some related collected findings related to reactogenicity. For instance, if a subject experiences a fever, it will result in one or more FA or FA finding about clinical events records for each daily assessment. And there will be also a vital sign, so a VS record, with the temperature details. And furthermore, there will be clinical events, so a CA domain record, summarizing the event experience. And in the event, for example, that the reactogenicity event becomes serious, this will be considered also an adverse event. So there will be also a record in the adverse event A domain. Typically, and that's one of the CBER recommendation or say request, you do use the cut variables such as VS cut for finding to ensure a clear identification and distinction of reactogenicity symptom assessment from other collected data. And you can also establish a relationship between all these related data through the REREC dataset. That is actually, in general, the use of the REREC dataset. It's the preferred CBER experience whenever you have to represent a relationship. These recommendations are also aligned with the CDER vaccine therapeutic area user guidance. But while in the TAUG, in the therapeutic user guidance from CDER, CDER provide two approaches. CBER has a preference for one in particular, the so-called flat model, which is the one it's here illustrated in this slide. This is an approach that might deviate from the SDTM implementation guidance, as most of the collected data is represented only once in SDTM data, and it's rarely derived. While here, depending how data collection instruments were designed to accomplish this model, you might need to derive the clinical events record from FA. When the CBER guidance was first introduced, the Vaccine Office conducted a webinar for which the recording is, by the way, still available on the FDA website. See here the link, to this webinar is available on the paper and also the end of the slide. In this webinar, they established the reason for these additional requirements, which was essentially to reduce the issue associated with poor quality submitted to the with poor data quality submitted, poor quality with the data submitted to the office in the past year. As often discussed and shared by FDA those days in the past, now less. discussing the issue they see often in data packages they receive. Some of the issues cited included an unclear clinical representation, such as terminology, definition, and the timing of events. And datasets were often disorganized, and as a result, these data were difficult to interpret, and data packages were more difficult to be used. Because of that, there was even the possibility of major amendment causing on the data packages provided by the sponsor, causing obviously an extension of the review timeline up to 3 months. To avoid that, the CBER division has established the need for early discussion with sponsor, and like with the CDER, the other division, they ask to submit early in advance the so-called Study Data Standardization Plan. But more than that, the CBER wants also to know for each study the list of the SDTM domains you will submit, including details of supplemental qualifier, and they also want to know which other dataset you will create for your analysis. It's not mentioned in the guidance, but during the webinar they also mentioned they wanted to see the case report form, the annotated case report form, so annotated with SDTM domains and variable names. They want to see this well in advance, so if possible also at the start of the study, so that they can provide well in advance recommendation also in the data collection that might later on affect the wish CBER SDTM mapping. Obviously, there are some requirements that if you didn't collect the data that way, it would be very difficult then to have a particular structure in SDTM. Obviously, this has some sense if you start discussing with the agency at the time of study start. So maybe a type C meeting might be too late for discussing such a set of details. The goal in the end is to provide CBER reviewers with the background needed to understand the purpose of the data and eventually to offer recommendation. This could involve remapping data to avoid custom domain or unnecessary mapping supplemental qualifier. Again, the purpose here is to reduce as much as possible differences in data packages received. And yeah, I'm with then I hope the most interesting part of my speech, where we share some experience and lesson learned from 2 of the most significant submissions we did to CBER in the past 5 years. So in a nutshell, our experience with this division, as previously discussed, so while the guidance provided by the FDA, such as the Study Data Technical Performance Guide, apply to all FDA divisions requiring data submission using standard, submitting to the CBER division holds a unique position due to a set of additional requirements compared to other divisions. Our main experience was with vaccine submission, but as I will discuss in a minute, in one occasion the CBER reviewer also asked us to follow their vaccine guidance, even if our submission was not about vaccine product. Unfortunately, in both cases, we were involved with all the sponsors only at the time of either the pivotal study conduction or analysis, or at the time of the preparation of the integrated summary of safety, so the ISS. So in particular, with the first experience, we did receive a lot of comments on SDTM mapping of our study, not only on the pivotal study, and we were required to follow both the vaccine CBER guidance and the CDISC vaccine therapeutic area user guidance, as well as sometimes example from other CDISC therapeutic user guidance. We tried to accomplish most of the requests, but in some cases this requires some retrospective changes, putting somehow at risk the traceability, given the fact analysis was almost finalized, if not completed, with also CSR written. And in some other instances, the request from CBER couldn't be satisfied because it requires some changes in the data collection we obviously couldn't do. We were also in some cases disagreeing with some requests because in our opinion those requirements were not fully CTM compliant. And in agreement with the sponsor, we did agree. With the sponsor, we did agree to apply those changes as they were of minimal impact, even if we were not fully agreeing with the request. This is somehow the time lapse of the two main submissions. As you can see, our first experience was just around the time the guidance was released, and because of that, we received obviously several comments, from which we then had somehow collected some lesson. Then we have then applied with the next submission that is actually currently ongoing. So as Ellie said, the first experience was actually not with the vaccine submission, but due to the way of reporting solicited events, there were a lot of similarities with vaccine, and therefore they asked us to adhere as much as possible to the vaccine guidance. Only two of the 5 studies were under our responsibility. That means we had to rework dataset packages provided by other CRO. We had about 20 different requests, of which 5 were rejected by us or because they were either not applicable or not doable. In particular, one where we were asked to flag some of the clinical events that were related to efficacy. Again, here we agree with the sponsor not to do this change, and furthermore, we had explained this to the agency. And this because this would have required the use of a complex algorithm described in the statistical analysis plan, which we deem somehow inappropriate to be derived in SDTM. Overall, the request required the update of 8 SDTM domains across different studies, with 2 of them also necessitating major changes to the ADaM structure, and the rerun of some linked table and figures. We then also incorporated our answer into an updated version of the Study Data Standardization Plan that was later on also resubmitted to the FDA. Based on the first experience we had, we were able to prevent most of the comments we had in the previous experience. So despite, again, the majority of the studies were not entered by us, and thanks to the collaboration with the other appointed vendors, we were able to apply preventive correction before submitting the Study Data Standardization Plan to the CBER. We had anyhow some comments, but as you can see, half compared to previous experience. Among them, actually, 4 did not require any corrective changes because the suggested implementation made by CDER for those impacted SDTM, actually, those domains were already mapped the way CBER requested. Other requests, as per the earlier presentation, other requests require, for example, a lab dataset using the US conventional unit in addition to the Standard International unit. In our case, this was already implemented into the meta qualifier of the LB domain, but recent version of the FDA Study Data Technical Conformance Guidance, if I'm not wrong, the one from June, require now to submit a custom domain. So essentially a copy of the LB dataset, where the standard results are reported using the US conventional unit rather than the standard international unit. Some requests require somehow some tweak to overcome some inaccurate CRF define, such as, for example, the identification of concomitant medications versus concomitant procedure. And the split was made retrospectively based on the medical dictionary applied. So if something could be coded with the WHO drug dictionary, then the information was mapped to CM, otherwise PR. What was instead more challenging with the submission was actually the sponsor itself, lacking of experience. That results in a lengthy discussion where we had to convince their clinical operation team about the feasibility of some requests versus those that were not, versus those where we were thinking the FDA request was not appropriate. Again, an official response was provided to the agency. Some SDTM domains were then updated with minor impact on ADaM and no impact on table figures and listing. So reaching the conclusion of my speech with some final remarks, experiencing the FDA CBER division. So submitting data packages to the CBER introduces some different challenges, even for sponsor experienced in implementing and submitting CDS data packages to the health authority, even when they carefully follow their CDS packages throughout the different phases of the development of the drug. By citing wording from past presentation, CBER guidance at this time are also a bit outdated, and they might require some update to be fully aligned with newer version of SDTM implementation guidance, for example. And I might extend this criticism to some guidance cited at the beginning. Some FDA unit sometimes make the effort of producing more detailed guidance to support specific indication, but they often forget somehow, let me say, them, and often they do not regularly review them to see if first they are truly applicable in practice, and second, if they require some management. Some CDS team, for example, they are now, like for example the ADaM team, they are now making the effort to review those guidance, and they're providing feedback to the FDA. The sponsor and the vendors are required to quickly adapt to these additional requirements and set on top of the one published by CDISC, and even more sometimes they have to cope with individual reviewer, as we saw in previous presentation, with the reviewer, as we saw with presentation from other sponsor or the CRO, with the reviewer asking the sponsor to provide also the source code that could work on the FDA system. That is something that is not required at all, at least according to the most current version of the FDA guidance and statement that made in public speech. For that reason, to avoid as much as possible unexpected last minute changes that might delay the review process, it is recommended to start discussing with the agency as soon as possible. And last but not least, to raise the final recommendation I want to give is to raise within your team the awareness, meaning that data standard governance team are responsible to regularly assess new guidance, digest them, and make them available to the rest of the team, making sure everyone facing data standard is aware that some specific requirement may be available in the therapeutic area, or specific indication they are working on, or specific requirements from specific division your submission will go through. Here I left you with I leave you with some references and other resources, and also here some additional recommended reading. This was the abstract I submitted to PHUSE. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, do not hesitate to contact me.